Okay, so Crave Assembly dropped the Tamurkhan blog today, the day after the release of the Throne of Decay trailer, and I was not anticipating it being anything substantial, so I wasn't really ready to record anything about it, but when I took a look, I first just read over the Tamurkhan part, which is just simply hyping up Tamurkhan as a unit on the battlefield. Hey, he's big, he's strong, he hits hard, he can ride a toad dragon, he gets health regen when he gets to low life, yada yada yada, the stuff you'd expect. But then I get to here, this chieftain menu, and I see that this is quite a bit more substantial than I anticipated. And then when I go further down, I see that they're even talking about the full Nurgle overhaul that's coming with the update. So I've decided I'm going to go ahead and instead actually read through this on recording. Now, I have not read through any of the details past the Tamurkhan section. So, this is going to be largely new stuff here. So, just immediately looking at this, I did not put in too much time with Marcus Wolfhart and his campaign. I maybe put in 10 turns. Even that's probably pushing it. So I did not interact with the hero unlocking mechanic that he had. But I do not remember having anything like this, where each of, apparently these chieftains have stuff tied to them. They've got like a trait. Okay, the trait is for their army. A talisman, is that for... Is that just for the chieftain themselves? And then Chieftain Fealty. Create plagues and defeat Warriors of Chaos, Khorne, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, or Norska to unlock... Okay, hang on, I better go ahead and just read. So, gather the strongest warriors of the world. Using two key resources, Dominance and Fealty, Tamurkhan can decide how best to manage his acquired chieftains. Dominance, acquired from winning battles, must be spent to acquire chieftains. Activate their abilities and add their units to his own recruitment pool. Interesting. The Fealty is increased by taking action with that said chieftain approves of, whether it be raiding, razing, wiping various opposing forces off the map. If Tamurkhan seeks a devoted chieftain from the Chaos Dwarfs, he'd best express the same hatred for the Skaven as they do. With their fealty increases, Tamurkhan can reap their benefits and favor units and special abilities, culminating in a mighty thematic quest battle on his path to gaining boundless loyalty from these great warriors. So, I see. These chieftains get stronger the more that you do they're given... Right, so just for Kazek the Befouled, it is that you are going to want to... Okay, yes, for just Kazek the Befouled, you will be creating plagues and defeating other Chaos factions. Though presumably for the Chaos Dwarf Chieftain, you will be wanting to fight Dwarfs and Skaven. Thimir maybe want you to fight the Empire. Couldn't predict with the others, really. But, yeah, and then you move through this panel and you unlock a separate recruitment mechanic for Tamurkhan, where he can directly recruit units instead of having to deal with Nurgle's cyclical buildings. I like Nurgle's cyclical buildings, and I don't like the idea of Crave Assembly giving up on the concept so quickly, because there's a lot of people out there who just want units to be built the usual way. But at the same time, I understand that these are more beneficial and encourage the player to participate in this mechanic more than just getting the hero and moving on. I do like that. And I see. So you get then these chieftain abilities, which I assume pop on whatever army the hero is in, which enables attrition for enemy armies in Kazek's current province, and increases the chance of a plague spreading all armies. Oh, all faction-wide abilities. Really? Well, that's neat. Yeah, this seems cool. Okay, there's more... to be honest, I was pretty underwhelmed when I saw that Tamurkhan's campaign mechanic was going to be just going around collecting heroes, but this is quite cool. Kazek the Befouled. By the way, I'm going to... I don't know, do I have the mouse visible on screen? No, I do not. Let me fix that. Or maybe it is. Okay, I'm just going to take it on faith here. But the area and kind of the a decent chunk of the screen here I cannot easily see, since I've put my webcam more or less right in front of my monitor, and I have it stood up on something as well, so that it's at a decent height for looking at me. So the general region of the left side of the text underneath Kasich the Befouled's picture, I cannot see very well. So I might sometimes be scrolling up here at awkward angles to get a look at it. But yeah, Kasich Befouled, it's going to discuss his lore a little bit. He was one of the first to join Tamurkhan's banner. He's rotted even by Nurgle standards, and he looks like it. He is a tank. His health regenerates. He gets increased ward save and above a certain health threshold. Interesting. So he gets tankier when he's at high health, but once he takes a bunch more damage, he gets weaker. Interesting. Always mounted atop a Rot Beast. Okay, so he doesn't start out on foot. He's like a Bretonnian hero or lord. He always gets him out from the jump. Interesting. Then you get a Chaos Lord of Nurgle. He is a generic lord. Okay, right. It's silly me. These are not the chieftains. These are... Yeah, the chieftains, I assume, will not really be revealed until we see the other YouTubers get a early play... get to play the game early. Let's see. So, yes, the Chaos Lord of Nurgle. Yeah, it looks solid. It looks about like what you'd anticipate. So, let's see. Is there anything particularly unique? Sword, shield, variety of mounts. Nothing too crazy. So, yeah. While the Sorcerer of Nurgle, I like this guy. This guy's got a cool look. This guy, yeah. He's got a bit of chaos armor, but he's more distinctively... uniquely designed than your usual sorcerer. I like that. He's got the hood going on, the whole thing. He looks like a smelly plague cultist, as he should. Is that a new animation? For him to be carrying that big sword and holding it on his shoulder? While he's got a staff in the other hand? Interesting. So, other than that, he looks like a standard... Oh, they do have some means of healing. Okay, interesting. But other than that, they seem like a standard sorcerer. Pestigores. So, we don't get a great look at them here. They do seem like they're... Yeah, I'd like to get a look at them head on, a clearer photo. We're really getting more of a shot of a bunch of dead orcs here. It's a little bit awkward, but it is what it is. So, they... Okay, now, how fast are they? I mean, obviously, we're not going to get stats here, but I'm curious. So, of course, they have great weapons. High health pool for an infantry unit. And the Tears of Nurgle. This passive chain hex may only be triggered once, activating when within range of an enemy unit, resulting in infectious secretions from every orifice that slow the opposition down before spreading through their ranks. This makes them a prime candidate for Vanguard deployment, another intrinsic trait of the Pestigores. Okay, so they have Vanguard deploy. The first time they charge in, they slow enemies down. Are they particularly fast? I mean, do they keep the Beastman's trademark high movement speed? That's an interesting question, because Nurgle is generally a very slow army. Pestigores would be interesting if they offered a faster infantry choice. But some of these things like this, we're going to have to wait until we actually get to see the unit stats. The Plague Ogre, is this guy trying to eat like some kind of maggot? It would seem a bit odd to do that right in front of Tamurkhan, who is himself effectively just a living maggot. So, the Plague Ogres are twisted amalgamations of once ordinary ogre, contorted by the blessings of Nurgle. So, is there going to be anything particularly interesting here? Sluggish yet durable infantry. And yeah, they can either take great weapons or giant blades. Huh. Weird that they're called sluggish yet durable. I assume they're slower than your standard ogre then. Because your standard ogre is about 50 speed, which is pretty fast by the standards of infantry. Very fast by the standards of infantry. Even Skaven aren't that fast. So, are they going to be quite a bit slower? I mean, I can't see Plague Ogres being anywhere near as slow as, say, Plague Bearers. But, difficult to say. I would assume they're a little bit faster than your standard infantry, just because they're so big. It'd be odd to see them move slowly. Rot Knights are one of the select few Chaos Knights blessed with the Mark of Nurgle and the power to ride Rot Beasts into battle. Their armor is rusted, and you can tell that is a cool looking beastie right there. It's a very cool looking mount. They are a monstrous cavalry unit, sacrificing speed for thicker skin with increased health, defense, and regeneration. Okay, I was interested in that, whether or not the Rot mounts would be any fast. Any fast. Boy, did I just wake up, huh? Yeah, I did just wake up. So, yeah, the Rot Knights are not going to be a particularly fast cavalry piece. You're still going to be going with Marauder Horsemen or Chaos Knights for your fast land units as Nurgle. Your fast units are just going to still be Rot Flies. The Rot Knights are going to be a fast, tanky cavalry unit, I guess, to just charge after people and then tie them down so that they can't get away from the other Nurgle units, or just tie them down in general. Yeah, lock down targets on the battlefield and shred their health. Anti-large. Okay, anti-large. Nurgle does lack for anti-large, doesn't he? Interesting. Okay, and they get an increased melee defense while they're in battle, and they have regeneration. So yes, anti-large. Right. What? Does Nurgle have any anti-large units? Other than... Nurgle doesn't even get Chaos Knights with halberds, does he? I don't remember him getting Chaos Knights with halberds. My memory is that he just gets Chaos Knight with shields and Chaos Knights with great weapons. This could be the first anti-large unit in Nurgle's roster, then, could it? Bile Trolls. I like the way these guys look. The Bile Trolls on the tabletop were kind of weird again. The Tamurkhan tabletop kind of pushed a little bit too hard into the idea of Nurgle, all of Nurgle's various creatures looking very cancerous. And I'm glad they retained that with Rot Knights, that the horse has turned into some weird cancerous sort of dog creature. But I like the Bile Trolls. I always thought looked ugly on the tabletop. And these guys look a lot more characterful. These guys look a lot more kind of old Warhammer-ish. And I like that a lot. So yes, these guys, let's see. They regenerate. Well, they're trolls. More regeneration than usual. Interesting. Poison attacks. Do they not have... Oh, Corrosive Bile Hex effect. Softening armor and flesh of their opponents, and plummeting their victim's melee defense. So they don't actually puke. I don't remember if they could do that on the tabletop. I never looked at their stats that intently. I thought the Bile Trolls had a special thing with their puke, though. Anyways, yeah, it's gonna be trolls, but with better health regen and some debuffs when they get into melee. And let's see, the Toad Dragon is the last big piece. This is going to be the big cinematic unit that they market a lot of the DLC on. So it is... The Toad Dragon is a monster for Nurgle. What is unique about it? Let's see. Looks like a standard monster so far. Most expensive... Oh, the most expensive unit for Nurgle to date. Okay. Really? More expensive than Great Unclean ones? I have to imagine it's not more expensive than an Exalted Great Unclean one. Heavy missile resistance. Unspeakable foulness. It spews forth a blast of flesh-rotting horror, delivering explosive damage and inflicting poisonous burns on its victims. Okay, so... Then, looking at this roster here, so Pestigors might actually be a relatively faster choice for Nurgle than usual. But Plague Ogres, it's still uncertain what their role is. I'm going to get, at the very least, they seem to be some kind of bruiser unit. But I'm kind of surprised that they said that they'll be slowed down. It'll be interesting to see how much slower they are than the standard ogre, because that could dictate a lot of what their role will be for Nurgle. Because if they're still sitting at 40s or so speed, then the Plague Ogres will still function as a faster unit in Nurgle's army. Rot Knights, I thought that because they looked a bit more lightly armored, I kind of figured they'd actually be a bit of a lighter, faster cavalry piece by Nurgle standards. But no, they're actually a dedicated anti-large cavalry, which is still, adding a much-needed role to Nurgle's roster. So that's nice. The Bile Trolls are just going to be a monstrous infantry that is pretty tanky and provides a lot of debuffs. These are the kinds of things that I do worry about with the Nurgle roster. The Nurgle roster, when I've played Nurgle, which I don't play Nurgle a ton, I think I said this yesterday, I've not played Nurgle a ton, and I'm sure there are Nurgle experts who would disagree with me on this. But Nurgle's roster seems like it has a lot of redundancy to me. A lot of units that fill the same purpose of just being tanky debuff units. And Bile Trolls, they do worry me that they're just going to be another redundant unit. And then the Toad Dragon is seemingly just going to be a big, expensive monster you almost get just to show off. Like the Dread Saurian for the Lizardmen. Or the Rogue Idol for the Greenskins. Which, I don't have a problem with that. It looks like a very cool unit. But probably because of the sheer expensiveness of the unit, it's probably not going to be that big of a change to the Nurgle playstyle, is it? And here we go, Nurgle Legacy updates. So, they have taken feedback from prior DLC. Okay, that's an entirely different Plague UI. Completely reworked from the ground up, including for impacting, actually, Kugath and Festus. So, let's see. What's this little video clip here? Okay, interesting. So, the plagues, you no longer throw together 3 symptoms in a pot. You instead... Hang on. So, you have to pick from a web. There can only be symptoms tied together. And it will make a different unique disease depending on the symptoms you chose. I guess. So I assume this is because the old Nurgle system, it got to be where once you unlock the unique named diseases, you only picked those. You didn't make your own custom diseases anymore. So this probably ties into that, I would assume. Maybe, I don't know. So, this does limit your creativity, I would definitely notice, but at the same time it makes it so that every disease is now a named disease, and there aren't any... You won't be getting to the end game and only using 5 diseases. Interesting. And I've also noticed you spend more of the little infection fly dudes to increase the spread chance, the duration, and reduce the immunity duration. Interesting. Okay, so this does deal with... So, this looks like it will at least partly deal with what I thought was the major issue with Nurgle, was that Nurgle is Nurgle, in previous points of the game, prior to this update apparently, was very reliant on RNG. And if the dice did not roll in your favor, then you just didn't get to get really much use out of a good couple of his campaign mechanics. And it stuck out to me because virtually everybody else gets guaranteed consistent results from a lot of their campaign abilities. And with Nurgle, the feeling was that you were supposed to just sit in your starting province for like the first 30 or 40 turns and get the technologies and the infections necessary before you could really start to play the game. Which was interesting as an idea to portray Nurgle as he is lorefully, which is kind of cultivating, diseased power, and then suddenly epidemic starts. But it did make for a very exciting campaign. So I'm glad to see they're doing something about that. I don't like that it still has to be an RNG chance to spread, but I'm glad that it's no longer just that the spread chance starts out as terrible and you have to wait, 40 turns to get decent spread chance. I'm glad that you can now just spin the flies, the little infection dudes, to forcibly choose how the disease spreads. Alright, so yes, the problem with the original system for plagues was that it was completely solvable. As a player, there was an objectively strongest route to take and no need to deviate from it to maximize the benefits and minimize the drawbacks. Yeah, that was pretty accurate. That was starting to get, I didn't get deep enough into an Nurgle campaign to really be able to definitively speak, but it seemed like it was going to get there. As soon as I saw the name diseases, I was worried about that. Plagues now exist within a web. They have to be connected. You combine 3 to create a plague. The user experience has been redesigned to better showcase how this plague will affect both Nurgle and non-Nurgle factions. Okay, positive for Nurgle, negative for everyone else. The symptoms location within the plague web will shift with every 3 plagues. Interesting. So you have to experiment, or it re-rolls the dice. It re-rolls the symptoms every 3 plagues. I like that. That's going to force you to always be coming up with new ones. You can't just constantly rely on the same old ones. I do like that. Now, there's always going to be some symptoms that the player is always going to try and focus on. The ones that give money, that was the thing that was notorious about Nurgle from day one, is they had such a rough time in the early game, but once you got the plague system started, you would constantly be using whatever plagues generated money because that would fund your armies. And people are probably still going to seek them out. And this one in particular, I mean, it's a money. You gain money by spreading it, and then you can also throw on melee attack or armor or campaign movement. All of these would be good to throw on your own armies. But the symptoms will shift, and who knows, maybe next time, the money buff, the income little disease there, will instead come with a little bit less exciting buffs, or disease symptoms, rather. Like, let's say, you know, what would be less exciting here? I don't know, growth and movement speed and ammunition. Any one of these things, you know, sometimes the debuff can be helpful, but the buffs aren't too helpful. Alright, introducing a new type of symptoms, blessed symptoms. These are assigned randomly and change with every plague cycle, and a symptom, while blessed, has its effects doubled. Interesting. So how do you tell what's a blessed symptom? Guess we'll find out when we actually get our hands on it. Plagues can now be mutated with increased effects, increasing spread chance, extending duration, and much more. Plagues now have an immunity period, so that those on the receiving end of being plagued aren't constantly under its effects, and have a respite between bouts. Okay, so to make it so that a plague can't just bounce back and forth between 2 settlements over and over again. Yeah. Kugath benefits greatly from this system. He is uniquely able to have many blessed symptoms active at once, allowing him to conjure much more fearsome diseases than his peers, and decimate the world with unholy infectious combinations. So, okay, I'm glad they specifically pointed out that Kugath is getting a big buff here, because Kugath has been, for me, a kind of a slow, rough campaign, both in Realm of Chaos and in Immortal Empires, both times I've tried to play him. So it's cool to see that. I'm glad that Kugath is still going to be the Plague Lord for Nurgle. He's not going to get left behind, because there are certainly some times where DLC Legendary Lords have left the base game Legendary Lords behind in this series. And you can still see that with a good couple of the Legendary Lords that are in the game right now. Cyclical buildings. Nurgle's cyclical buildings has led to some unique and thematic gameplay strategies when it comes to recruitment, but we felt it had a negative impact on their economy and defensive capabilities. Yes, that is a big problem, is that his money buildings and his garrison buildings are also cyclical, so your money will just go down for no reason sometimes. And your garrison will also... Was your garrison cyclical? I don't remember if it was. I didn't play enough Nurgle, so I should shut up. Either way, military buildings are still cyclical, but all remaining buildings are now static like other factions. Military buildings now cost infections instead of treasury to help with managing the choice between improving infrastructure and recruiting forces. Interesting. Well, that is going to be kind of helpful for Nurgle, because Nurgle does suffer from money pretty badly in the early game, but with a more consistent economy, will his economy be so bad now? They've done an economy pass on the buildings following this change to help with Nurgle's difficult financial situation, allowing players to choose the treasury building rather than having their economy gain split between all chains. Interesting. Resource buildings have had effect overall. Grammar's a little bit off there, but okay. Cult buildings have undergone an effect pass. The remaining cyclical buildings can now be rushed by spending infections. Interesting. So can you force the cyclical buildings to move through cycles by spending infections? Interesting. Okay. Yeah, this sounds pretty cool. Curious to see how it'll work in execution. Recruitment. Nurgle's recruitment is currently too punishing for the benefit of instant recruitment. Recruitment cost and recruitment health are now tied to the Nurgle corruption level of the province. 30% health at 0 corruption, 60% health as well as minus 50% recruit costs at 100 corruption. Ooh, yeah, I do remember that being a problem with Nurgle for how little money he has. It did seem like his recruitment cost was really high to try and deal with the fact that Nurgle could recruit units instantly. But the units didn't come out too healthy, so it wasn't like the instant recruitment was that OP anyways. So, interesting. Yeah, that really encourages you to corrupt the hell out of whatever settlements you're at. And with the addition of rushing construction, cyclical building should now fill up recruitment pools much easier in the early game. Nurgle's tech tree lacked a clear direction and was designed too heavily around Kugath's Realms of Chaos experience. Yes, it was. One of the first techs you get is one that just buffs how good your settlements are as long as they're in the Chaos Wastes. Kugath is so far from the Chaos Wastes. That was bizarre that he had that still. Is he the farthest from the Chaos Wastes? No, that would probably be Scarbrand. Scarbrand's really far from the Chaos Wastes. Nurgle's tech tree is now split into two distinct groups, one focused on military and the other on campaign faction bonuses. Does he lose the number theme? I like that each of the Chaos Gods had a number theme to their technology tree. That's a little bit sad, because I like that little lore tidbit, but I accept that it is what it is. Layout has been reworked to make it clearer and easier to progress. Previously, Nurgle gained army ability points based on the amount of damage taken. This didn't reward Nurgle players enough and seemed like a consolation prize for losing units. Yeah. Interesting. Where are we going here? Because Nurgle, to me, it seemed like the system was more rewarding for Nurgle players that used a lot of health regen. So where are we going from here? I don't know. While we're on this note, before I move on to actually what they've changed here, I do want to note that I've noticed with Slaanesh. To me, it seemed like a problem with Slaanesh. Slaanesh gets their army ability points from killing units that are currently routing. But for one thing, that kind of relies on there being a situation where Slaanesh has enough units free to chase after routing units, which is not always a choice you get to make as Slaanesh, and so that means you don't get to use Slaanesh's army abilities. But more significantly, it means that by chasing after routing units, you are effectively lessening the possibility for the enemy army to survive the battle. Which would not be a problem for most races, but Slaanesh kind of wants the enemy army to survive the battle, so that they will take the Mark of Slaanesh and go home with it and spread Slaanesh corruption. And get them more, devotees. Yeah, get them more devotees. To me, it always seemed like Slaanesh had two it felt like the army abilities in battle you had to use at the cost of suffering in campaign. And I don't want to do that. Because what you sacrifice to get a little win in a battle pales in comparison to what benefits you can reap on the campaign side. So I hope with the next DLC they consider changing up Slaanesh's army ability system a little bit. But either way, Nurgle now gains a passive income of army ability points for every enemy unit in the battle map that is currently being affected by a negative effect or debuff. Interesting. Does that count spells? This plays into Nurgle's playstyle of spreading debuffs and contact effects and makes them even more desirable for both campaign and battles. Interesting. So you'll want... How many of Nurgle's units have debuffs? Virtually all of them have Cloud of Flies, right? Interesting. Yeah, after this recording, I'm actually going to open up Total War Warhammer, and I'm going to look at Nurgle's army list and see how many units actually give out debuffs, because that's going to encourage the player to think differently about the way they build their Nurgle armies. Interesting. Huh. Well, anyways. So yeah, it's going to enhance the Nurgle experience for Kugath and for Festus and for Tamurkhan. Right, the plague system exists for Festus as well. And right down here they have, there's one more Legendary Lord of Nurgle. And Reckon we've cataloged, so yes, Epidemius is there. I think everybody knows that by now. And let's see. I'd like to see this little section here without having to scroll down into the comments. Next week is Elspeth van Draken, and in the last week before release, will be Malachi McKyson, okay? Oh, no, wait. And then, okay, excuse me. The week after Elspeth will be Malachi. And the week after that will be Epidemius and the Nemesis Crown. Okay. So, yeah, this is really cool stuff. I'm curious to see how many changes the Empire gets then. Because that change to the plague system and to the cyclical buildings, those are some big overhauls to Nurgle. So I'm curious to see just how many changes the Empire and the Dwarfs get. The Dwarfs, I think, should get the least changes. To me, the Dwarfs were in the best campaign place. Personally, the only change I'd make is making it where you can repeat some of the runes in the runic smithing screen. Oh, am I losing my mind? I thought that they were all unique and you could only craft them once. And you'd get, like, you know, the more common runes, you would, like, get 9 when you craft them. But the rarer ones, you'd only get 3 or something like that. The runic banners, I mean, and the character runes. I would prefer for those to be a bit more mass-producible. That would make the Dwarfs campaign feel a little bit more interesting to be able to throw around more banner runes. But I also understand they did it partly just so that when you play Dwarfs, you're not going to entirely ignore the ancillary system and instead focus on crafting runes instead. So who knows? Yeah. Huh. Interesting stuff. So, yeah, I'm glad to see all this. This is going to definitely make me more interested in playing Nurgle. It almost feels like off recording I might go ahead and just play a little bit of Festus just so I can see how Festus played before the big Nurgle overhaul, because that's also going to affect him on the side with the way they're changing plagues. So I feel like I should, at the very least, check him out for a little bit and see how he was, or is, before the big update. But that's very cool stuff. The units that come with Tamurkhan and Tamurkhan himself seem neat. I'm glad to see that Tamurkhan's campaign mechanic is more interesting than just going around collecting heroes and they're just join your army and that's it. Curious what that chieftain recruitment pool is, how that works. I assume it's just going to be similar to Regiments of Renown. Or Raised Dead. And the units look visually impressive. Curious to see how many actual gameplay changes they bring, though. I feel like the Pestigors and the Plague Ogres are both going to bring considerable changes to the Nurgle potential playstyle because they're probably going to be on the relatively cheaper side. Guess we'll see when we get our hands on them. Alright. I will go ahead and be, yeah, I'll go ahead and whenever next week rolls around and Elspeth comes around, that blog, I will record myself talking about that one too. So, see you then.